Pat, we've had a number of big summer blockbusters this year.
Yes.
A lot of them involving people running and fighting on tops of trains. And today, as we look back in our Nostalgia series, we're going to be talking about a film that's 40 years old, featuring a centerpiece in which people run at each other fighting on tops of trains.
Well,
Also, strange. Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, also, strangely enough, involving a Russian madman who's pushing the boundaries of what NATO will find acceptable on the world stage, a critique of the West as decadent and divided, and a film in which the price of eggs has gone through the roof. Everything old is new.
It seems very contemporary.
Yeah. We're talking about, of course, Octopussy from 1983, the James Bond film starring Roger Moore. Not one of the, yes, not one of the most popular James Bond movies, as I understand it.
No, I'm on a group with James Bond folk, and literally you cannot mention this film on this forum because of its despising from that group. I don't know why, having finally seen it for the first time, but there it is. There's
So
a couple of things that they always point out, which we'll talk about.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll definitely get into the issues with it because right off the bat, I love this movie. I have not seen as much James Bond as I should have. I've seen a few of the Connerys. I've seen all the Craigs. I think I've seen a couple of the Brosnans. This is my first Roger Moore that I've watched from start to finish. And I don't know how anybody could not love this this James Bond movie.
Well, one of the things that gets the group that I'm in always gets their tempers up is when I mentioned that Roger Moore is my favorite James Bond, but I always put a codicil there that says, "Hey, you like the Bond you grew up with." I really do believe that. I mean, maybe there's some nebulous debate within the Pierce Brosnan and Timothy, what's that guy?
Timothy Dalton.
Thank you. Coterie there that, because they weren't as long lasting as Sean and Roger. So, but I mean, all through the 70s when I was going through my early phases of movie going, it was Roger Moore. And I really didn't discover the Sean Connery ones till I became an adult in the film buff. So, and they seem to have a formula that is pretty much the same. So I don't really see Connery being that much above anybody else. But again, preference is the Bond you grew up with.
That's a very interesting point because they are both kind of older gentlemen. I mean, the Bonds tend to have skewed like younger, I think, in the with Brosnan and certainly Craig, but these guys are very distinguished, as they say. But there is, I think Connery is just seen as more of a classy Bond somehow, even though both he and Roger Moore indulge in the kind of the quips and the one-liners as that sex and comedy and adventure angle to both like versions.
Right. And I think Connery holds a place because he originated the character and that. And of course, in 1983, he revived the character for another studio, and it affected a lot of what Octopussy did and brought Roger Moore back to it because of the competing. They didn't want to transition to another Bond while Connery was going to redo the character and Never Say Never Again, of course, which is a remake of Thunderball. Same year.
Wow. I haven't seen either of those, which, I got to do some more homework. But Octopussy is, again, not having seen many James Bond movies, I have a conception of who the character is based on pop culture. This one, I don't know if it's rare among these films, but he almost seems to have accidentally fallen into this case that involves the fate of the world. Another 00 agent, 009, is killed while he's retrieving this Fabergé egg that turns out to be it's either a counterfeit or it's the real one, and the real one's being auctioned at Sotheby's, and they want to get a hold of it. I lose track of all this counterfeiting business because it's kind of a red herring, right? For the big plot that's going on, involving the Russians wanting to, a sort of dissident Russian general wanting to launch a nuclear attack on an American base in Germany, because that would set off an international incident, but it would not be, the Russians wouldn't necessarily be blamed because it would look like an accident or some kind of another act of aggression. Thus, everyone would have their defenses, their eyes off of Russia, and that would allow them to push out and basically attain world dominance. His superiors are not happy with that because, as is pointed out, I'm not sure if it's by the premier or who that's supposed to be in the war room. He's like, look, we don't need to use our weapons. We can impose world socialism through peaceable means. So, i.e., like propaganda and things like that. Right. Again, kind of another kind of contemporary angle on things, even though we are, on the brink of another possibly hot war, which is scary, especially in context of I've seen Oppenheimer since the last time we talked about this. And so the prospect of one atomic bomb is scary enough, but, flash forward, 30 or 40 years, and you've just got like the major countries, they've all got multiples of these. It really is kind of chilling. And it's a strange backdrop for this, happy-go-lightly spy thriller.
Right, because there's a light tone, and this is what characterized Roger Moore. He was much lighter than any of the other Bonds. It's interesting to me what happened to James Bond after Roger Moore's reign. We went into Pierce Brosnan, we went into Timothy Dalton, but they still maintained that air of quipping, which Sean Connery did to a degree, but not to the degree of Roger Moore. This could practically be called comedy. He quips so much. So the two things that really the James Bond group that I belong to despise is the Tarzan yell in the jungle chase, and the fact that he dresses up as a clown. So I don't know why that's so disturbing to them, but there it is. I mean, the Tarzan yell, I think, was a bad decision. Like, they had him swinging on a vine, and somebody said in the editing room, "Hey, if we had a Tarzan yell, we'll get a laugh there." But it makes no sense.
Tarzan is a big pop cultural icon. It's an iconic yell, and then the swinging through the jungles. It just does not work at all as an homage. I think Steven Spielberg found that out in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when Shia LaBeouf is swinging through with monkeys swinging through the jungle, and he does the call. Nobody appreciated that. And I don't think anybody appreciated that in OCTOPUSSY, because I will agree that's one of the few things about this movie I think that absolutely does not work.
Yes, it doesn't. And so, again, besides those two things, which are pretty glaring, and the clown thing makes a bit more sense, but we'll talk about that later. The film is to me typical Bond. I mean, it has Russians, it has nuclear weapons, it has a lot of great action sequences, which you said at the top of the show we've seen again this summer in Indiana Jones 5 and Mission Impossible 7. Both films had a train sequence where they're fighting on top of a train, which in physics is impossible. And then of course, there was a really great action sequence in the beginning, which opens the film, of a miniature plane kind of dodging a missile. The old gag where the heat-seeking missile goes after the plane dives through the headquarters, and suddenly it blows up. But spoiler alert. But the third thing, of course, is the miniature taxis in supposedly New Delhi. That there's a chase sequence, but it's a real chase. It's not the Indiana Jones CGI chase.
Right. I mean, they're the Tuk Tuks, and that's
Right.
another eerie coincidence between 40 years ago and what was going on in the box office this summer. The Tuk Tuk chase, and you had mentioned this before. The one of the, I guess, I think they called it uh, base I, or no, it's I station, which I think is the code for MI6 for India, because Bond goes there to, as part of this tracking down the real Fabergé egg, and there's this kind of a shady criminal mastermind named Kamal Khan, played by Louis Jourdan. Classic Bond stuff. But in the middle of figuring all of this stuff out, there's a big chase scene through the crowded market streets, and one of Bond's assistants is, I think it's Vijay or Vinay.
It's, I think, Vijay.
Vinjay, yes. You mentioned that he was actually a tennis, like a tennis player of some note.
Yes,
and there
he
is
was a pro tennis player turned actor, and they have a really good gag associated with it during the chase, where we see the people turning their heads as if they're watching a tennis match. I thought, now see, that's a clever gag. It's an inside joke, and yet again, Roger Moore's Bond is criticized for being too goofy or wacky or whatever you want to say.
Well, that's the thing, is it works even outside the context of knowing anything about that actor, that it's an in-joke, because you're watching the action cut back and forth, and it's almost like a tennis match. So you can see the people on the street, doing that same thing. I picked up on it without even knowing anything about the actor.
Right.
But also, there are all these like little cultural touchstones that are used as launching points for either gags or action set pieces. When Bond first gets to India, his contact is posing as a snake charmer, and he's playing the tune on the flute or whatever, and it turns out to, as he's charming the cobra, it's the James Bond theme, and that's how he recognizes him.
Very funny. The actor also, himself.
No, go ahead.
Oh, just the actor again. The tennis pro turned actor was deathly afraid of snakes. I mean, in the Indiana Jones mode, and hated doing that scene. I read in some of the fun facts on IMDb.
Oh no! Well,
my image is reversed in this one, so I keep looking the wrong way.
It's all right.
I have to turn to the opposite direction, but.
Well, the other thing about that chase through the market is there's a guy who's like laying on the posture, the kind of the bed of needles.
Yeah.
And another guy gets up from it. I think Bond slams one of the guys who's chasing him into it, and the guy who's laying on the bed says, "Get off my bed." Yeah. I also liked at the end when Bond escapes by wading through, into this river to catch up to an American tourist boat, and blend in with that crowd to escape the bad guys. You can hear it's like a bit of ADR. One of the tourists says, he's taking a picture. He says, "Oh, I've got to get a picture of that guy in the turban. I love that." It's just such a out of touch touristy thing to say.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of that Western mystery going into India thing, and this was 1981. But again, we forget that the world wasn't as close back then. There were still places to go that you really didn't know about. So they were doing the shorthands, the bed of nails, small taxis, the jungles, the monkeys, the tigers, which Bond is able to control just by saying sit. In the manner of a dog trainer on British television at the time. Again, I read that little nugget. But yeah, so, you can't place, well, I can place myself in 1981, and I can know for sure if I went to that theater at that time, I would have thought, oh yeah, that's India. Oh yeah, they have people sleep on a bed of nails, and they have tiny taxis and snake charmers. It's all that shorthand that they use in their xenophobic way.
Well, I mean, you call it xenophobic, but we had this discussion when we talked about Enter the Dragon a while ago,
Right.
which it also has some strange ties to this movie. There's a fortified kind of city with a bunch of trained assassins kind of hanging out under the direction of a charismatic leader. But we talked about the sort of the Asian cultural, possible insensitivity there, and it was a bit of a debate, like, were the filmmakers generally being callous or careless in their depiction of these, what they might call exotic cultures, or are they just kind of doing the best that they could with what they what they had available? Because again, not everyone had the internet, or no one had the internet in their back
No.
pocket where they could look up stuff and call someone like 5,000
Right.
miles away.
Right. They had to put those shorthands in, of course, but uh, as time goes on, you would think, oh, maybe a little more sensitivity. And speaking of which, to me, this was a transitional movie when it came to the way these films treated, women. Um,
Hmm.
Although you still had there's one that's really bad. I think the one where he zooms the camera into the woman's cleavage is so juvenile, and especially when you realize Roger Moore's like 56 or 7 years old. You should get over those goofy things. But besides all that, and it's very much Bondian in that way. It's especially how the character treats and beds women, but there is very very strong women. The two Bond women are very strong. They're either leading something, or they're a thief, or that sort of thing. They run a whole Amazon island where the women dress up like characters from The Incredibles. I'm sure Brad Bird saw that. It's astounding how much these uniforms look like The Incredibles.
Yeah, there was definitely some note taking going on there. I think it's almost inescapable. But yeah, in terms of the depiction of the Bond girl, you look at Octopussy, played by Maud Adams, and she is the leader of this cabal of international criminals, and I guess assassins, at the waiting. It's a very powerful role, and she still has that kind of, she is Bond's love interest in the movie, but you
Right,
don't get the feeling that she doesn't like melt at his touch. She's doing
right.
business with the bad guys of the movie. She ends up getting duped by them, but then kind of rallying her people to help essentially save the world towards the end. It's a more complex character than maybe we've seen in other films. But again, I haven't seen all the James Bond movies, so I can't really attest to that.
Well, some of the love making in the Bond films are a quid pro quo thing. There's a spy versus spy element to it. Um, and I think in this one, it was like much stronger. There's the scene with the first woman, who was played by, you have the cast list in front of you, the first Bond girl in it. Um, anyway, she escapes by uncurling her dress. So goes off the balcony, and like rappelling down with a rope. She uses her dress to get into the car and drive away. Uh,
Yeah, that was Magda, plays by Christina
Thank you.
Wayborn, and she was very kind of sultry, and she pops up throughout the rest of the film. But yeah, I love that she gets the egg, and then the scene leading up to that is she wakes up. She thinks Bond is still asleep, and she steals. She swipes the egg, but he can very clearly see that she's got it because they're kissing in front of a mirror, and she keeps trying to palm it. But when she escapes and she goes right into the car, the waiting car of Kamal Khan,
uh,
I like that Khan looks up at Bond, and they just kind of give each other a little nod, like, all right, you win this one. It wasn't like there wasn't a lot of gloating. There wasn't a lot of damn. It's just kind of like, well, Bond
yeah.
got played this time.
Well, Louis Jourdan's pretty low key in this. Probably one of the most low key Bond villains I've run across. And speaking of the egg, and we were talking about this earlier, there's about the forgery versus the real ones. It's sort of a MacGuffin because it's not a part of the main story. There's a holding house in Russia, or a house where they keep bringing in these eggs and these other pieces of jewelry, and they're like, okay, make a forgery, or is this the real one? So I don't know if the filmmakers did on purpose to keep everybody off track. It's very confusing. It was confusing to me. I just didn't know what this holding house was about. Was it about making forgeries, or was it determining between a forgery and a real item? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know either.
Guy constantly had one of those glasses in his eye. That's all I
know. The jeweler's eye, yeah.
Yes.
That was confusing to me too, because a couple of reasons. One, like all of the forged items or the real items that they were going to make off with, and I guess the idea was to replace the real items with the fakes in the places where they were supposed to appear, so that no one would be the wiser. But they stuff all of their combined goods into like this little package, or this little like metal case, and then they make off with it. What's the rest of the stuff in that room about? And also I kept getting confused, because towards the end, when there's all this stuff happening on the circus train, they cut back to the room of forgeries. And I'm like, wait, is the forgery room one of the compartments on the circus train? Because it's like this little narrow box. I have no idea.
Well, also the container in which they ship everything in is one of the most inconvenient pieces of containment I've ever seen. It's like, it's cylindrical shape, takes two men to heft it. I'm like, very, very ill-advised transport, I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad that this was a part of the movie, because it does add that extra bit of, flavor to it. I mean, I guess you could call it an egg MacGuffin, but sorry.
Ooh.
Thank you. I think the bigger plot with the nuclear, trying to get the nuclear bomb onto the base, that's the real meat of it. And you mentioned that your Bond cinephile friends take issue with Bond dressing up as a clown at the end. The only thing I really took issue with was the time that it took for him to go into that train car and put on a full clown outfit with perfectly done clown makeup. If you're looking at the red digital readout on the bomb itself, it's like at 5 minutes. And then when he comes out of that room, it's 4 something. So he got into that whole outfit, and I'm like,
seconds to change.
No, that's not a thing.
Even as I mentioned earlier, if it would have been at 10 and then went down to 5, I would have said, okay, somebody was in there, helped him do it, whatever. But no, 30 seconds. And you'd think they'd be in the editing room saying, well, he can't just go in there and automatically change like Batman going down the bat pole. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't. But I will say, and that's the kind of the roller coaster of this movie, is you've got stuff that's completely ridiculous and weird and kind of funny, haha, like that. But then the scene where he's dressed up as the clown and he goes into the 3-ring circus because the bomb is in there, and you've got these kind of these American military sitting right up at the front. These kind of 2 other American generals. Bond goes up to them. He's like, "Look, there's a bomb here. It's about to go off." And the one guy's like, "Ha, you're hilarious. This is part of the joke, right?" And he starts taking off his clown makeup. He's like, "Look, I'm with MI6 and we have no time left." And so they start defusing the bomb. When he gets the bomb out, it goes down to 1 second on the digital readout, and then he pulls it completely out of the casing, and at 0 seconds, the 2 little triggering mechanisms pop out of the back, and you realize, and that's the first time I think in a movie that I've really seen how a bomb like that is supposed to work, because usually it's, you got to cut the blue wire or the red wire. Like, I don't know what any of that means or how it would be set off. Here you get a clear depiction of it, and you're sweating bullets. Because much like the Mission Impossible films, you know that Ethan Hunt is going to be okay because it's Tom Cruise. But it's in the, how is he going to get out of these situations, these impossible situations, that's the fun and the mystery of it. I was like that. I was biting my nails during the sequence at the circus because everything is just coming to a head and it's pulled off so great. There's no comedy in it. It's just all tension.
Right, and it's done well. It's good editing. It's a good cut between what's going on and where the bomb is, and this chaotic circus that's going on. In fact, there's somewhat of a melee with all these circus people in the midst of it. That's both highly comic and highly logical given the circumstances of what's going on. Yeah. So
Well, it's funny because before we get into the three ring action of it, he still has to get onto the base and get into that, into the clown car in the tent. But there's like German police coming after them. There's Khan and his cohorts trying to escape because they know the bomb is going to go off. And you've got all these forces converging on this base. It reminded me of the climax of the Blues Brothers. And then when they finally get into the circus tent, that reminded me of the end of Blazing Saddles, when all the different people from the different movie sets converge and start fighting each other.
Since you're the pun master that you are, did you like did you like Roger Moore's kind of, I don't know if call it wit, but his constant quipping, his comment, his cynical commenting on the scene. Like my favorite was during the tiny taxi chase. They burst through this billboard. They cut right through it. And then another new billboard comes down to hide the lair, which they go into. So Bond goes, "It pays to advertise."
I love that. And, I think the first line of dialogue in the film is sort of a pun because he disguises himself as this General Toro. And he looks at the name tag and he says, "Toro, that looks like a load of bull." I'm like, okay, this is what kind of movie I'm dealing with. And it's totally fine because
but then it goes into a pretty good action sequence, I thought.
A great action sequence because Bond is disguised as this guy, this general. He, of course, I think he's trying to defuse a bomb or he's planting a bomb, right? He gets caught by the general, taken away on a Jeep with armed guards. And while they're driving, this white sports car pulls up next to them. And this is 1983, the same year as National Lampoon's Vacation. You get a woman doing the Christy Brinkley thing, the hot lady in the sports car to distract the idiots. And Bond gets free. He gets to a horse trailer that's just out in the middle of the road. And you realize that the horse trailer, the front comes down, the horse tail goes up, and out of the ass, of the horse comes this mini plane.
Quite remarkable too. And I guess that's a real plane. I don't know, or maybe it's a prop that they use as a plane. But man, was it cool! And again, that's when the heat-seeking missile is going against him. He does the classic go through headquarters, narrowly going through a door. And then, boom, shakalaka, the place goes up.
This movie begins and ends with some pretty spectacular plane work. I mean, the plane that we see is a real plane. I think they might have, for the horse bit, just for where it's coming out of that carriage, they might have had a proper, some kind of modification to it. But you're right. He flies into that hangar and they're trying to close the doors. And it's a scene we've seen 100 times before where he's flying and then he has to do this because the doors are closing and he gets through and it goes up. It's still thrilling because you realize that these aren't miniatures. It's not CG. It's someone actually doing this that is potentially a very dangerous scene.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the last sequence, of course, is you have Bond like grabbing onto a plane as it's going into the air and, messing up an engine and going into the flaps and, while Louis Jourdan, which every Bond film, everybody has a pilot's license. Doesn't matter. Everybody and anybody can fly a plane. I'm surprised the Tiger didn't get in the cockpit and fly. I mean, so that's really exciting and real. And again, Mission Impossible used that in one of their pieces differently, but they had a fight on a plane similarly.
Right. I mean, I think it was a couple of movies ago, you had Tom
Yep.
Cruise, and that was the big advertising thing where he's holding on to the side of a plane or a rocket or something and actually going up, and you see the ground falling away behind him. You know, you know that it's not Roger Moore up on that plane. They do some clever editing where he's on a soundstage with wind blowing through his hair and rear projection. But when it cuts to the stunt person up on that plane, you still realize it might not be Roger Moore, but it's definitely supposed to be James Bond, and it is most certainly a stunt person. One of the, whoever this person or persons is, are, were, one of the most courageous things I've ever seen, because this plane, they are rising up into the air. They're doing twists and turns because Khan wants to shake Bond off. And you can see that they're actually doing this. It's wonderful, breathtaking aerial photography. Then, again, I don't see how anyone can dismiss this movie out of hand based solely on that climactic 7-minute sequence where Khan's big henchman, Gobinda, played by Kabir Bedi, he's ordered out to, go get Bond off the top of my plane. The guy's like, you want me to go out there? He's like, yeah. So he gets out and they fight on top of this moving plane.
Yeah, unbelievable. Again, the laws of physics being broken. Now, did you notice, what was the sequence where there was an extended exchange of gunfire? And to me, that seemed out of touch with what Bond was. I didn't recall a lot of gunfire, but then I remembered one of the last Daniel Craig, No Time to Die, there was like a 10-minute gunfight. So I don't know. Do you think having guns and having a gunfight in Bond is unprecedented in your experience, or not?
No, I mean there's been gunplay in it. I definitely. I'm trying to think of which sequence you're referring to. Like at what point did they? I watched it a couple of days ago, so I'm still the big set pieces stand out.
I said more gunplay in the early Bond film, or maybe I didn't notice the others. And then, of course, No Time to Die had literally a 10-minute gun scene where there were a lot automatic rapid fire as they shot that car up. Remember, it was impenetrable, the bullets, but they just kept shooting at it,
spinning around
hoping to penetrate, which in Bond is very imperative. They did have a hot balloon chase too. They use a hot balloon to come into something, and I'm expecting Mission Impossible to steal that stunt for the next film.
I'm sure. I mean, they've conquered just about every other kind of vehicle. Hot air balloons are next.
Well, they said, we talked about this. They've said that Enter the Dragon is sort of the action picture that redefined action pictures going forward. Well, I think all these Bonds, starting with Connery all the way up through Moore, and all these guys who are creating movies now or in that middle section, certainly looked at those and said, okay, let's do that in the modern sense and see how it works. Because, again, Indiana Jones 5 and Mission Impossible 7, we saw several of the things that were in OCTOPUSSY. Another point I wanted to bring up about the bridge of women, how women are treated, because we know, as we got to No Time to Die, Bond is virtually a eunuch. He just can't go. He can't go after anybody anymore because it's not politically correct. So now I lost my point of reference. I had a point, but I can't think of it now. But
you're talking about the bridge, the kind of the treatment of women throughout the eras of Bond.
Here's the point. This film was 40 years ago. It's sort of like we're watching, we're seeing a film in 1981, and Casablanca was 40 years before, and they certainly treat people differently in that one. So you can't really say, oh, why is this so sexist? Because it's just from an era where that was somewhat accepted in the movies. Although you can see, again, there's a bridge to something else there.
Right, and that's
Just the
but
length
I
of
think
time. You don't realize the length of time because they do seem so contemporary still.
right, and I think it's frankly, I think for me, refreshing to go back and watch these older movies where there was, perhaps there were some insensitivities regarding the dynamics of the sexes, but there's at
Right,
least, an element of romance. And I think that's something that has been largely lacking in a lot, going back several years. And we can, I understand where it comes from, but I think people have gone way too hard in the opposite direction to the point
right.
where most of the action heroes are completely sexless. Most of
Yeah,
the action heroines have turned into, pale versions of the action hero. So they're
right.
sexless
Well,
too.
especially in
It's
the Bond films. Yeah, you
yeah.
know, this woman's in a $1,000 cocktail dress doing karate kicks. Yeah, but times change. Times change. I get it.
Well,
Uh,
but I mean, even looking at Vesper Lind from Casino Royale, Bond had a romantic kind of. They had like a full blown love affair that ended tragically.
right.
In you flash forward a few years and a couple of different Bond installments, and yeah, you're right. He's a he's kind of a eunuch, even though he's had like I guess a wife and a daughter, but he still seems I don't know, just kind of broken and dumb.
I'm not a fan of No Time to Die, but
Mm-mm.
there are more dick jokes in this film than I think any other Bond film. Q can't get it up. The in and
Yeah,
out chant at the end. In, out. And then the leg pulley rising when she gets
yeah.
there's a lot of
You
dick
know,
jokes.
you're right, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with it. Went way too far the other direction. Back in 1983, you're right. Bond, he's 56. He's a world class, spy. Yeah, he likes the ladies and everything, but you're right. The thing with the zooming in on the cleavage, the thing of the constant like innuendo. It's like this guy gets enough action, but he acts like a high schooler who's never touched a girl.
Exactly. And let's not, we have to bring up the explanation for the nickname Octopussy given to Octopussy by her father. Yes,
Look,
that didn't make me too uncomfortable.
okay, yeah, Octopussy is, Maud Adams' character. She explains to James Bond because her dad was a renowned like octopus scientist, and that was
Yeah.
his nickname for her. I would think like, my little octopus or something, but Octopussy for a little girl?
You don't have to
No.
be Freud to figure that one out. That's what he used to say. Now,
I
there's another interesting fact about Octopussy, the movie. It's based on a short story. And of course, they made up a whole new plot surrounding it. But to use the title, they had to put enough of the short story in so that you can justify the connection. And that was a deal between Ian Fleming's estate and the filmmakers. So I think it was the first Bond. Yeah, it was the first woman he met was related. She was the daughter of the person that is in the short story, as they connected it. I don't think it was Octopussy, but it was the first person that he encounters, first Bond girl he encounters.
Oh, is that Magda, the blonde one
Yes.
with the she had the Octopussy tattoo,
Ah,
which looked like one of those little rub off tattoos from when you were a kid, like a temporary tattoo. That was not real ink. No way.
uh, yes. Suggests that the woman lead be made out not to be an evil villain, but the daughter of the man in the story. And so it was Maud Adams. And she
Okay.
was at the auction, right? And she was there because she was the daughter of the guy in the
No, it
story.
was Magda, she
Okay,
was the one at the
so I
auction.
was right
We
the
meet
first time.
right. Yeah, we
Okay,
meet Octopussy later. I think at first we see her just from behind in that like white silk robe with the octopus on it, and then
right.
eventually we see her. It's a great reveal. Um,
Well,
but
I think one of the problems is they both look very similar. Magda and Octopussy. Don't you think they have the same bone structure? It seems.
I was gonna say, because one, Octopussy has like kind of dark brown hair. Magda's a blonde, but they
Right.
both.
You've just froze. Frozen.
Okay, am I back yet?
There you go. You're
Okay.
back.
But both of them have cheekbones that are about as sharp as that saw blade weapon that one assassin has towards the end of the movie.
Oh, the saw blade guy. That was crazy. That was good. I like that.
Yeah,
it was so frightening. You don't want to be in the way of that blade.
Right. That was another bit where I wondered about the safety on the set of making the movie, because it's ripping through plaster and bed sheets and all of that.
So I was looking, here it is. Octopussy is the daughter of Major Dexter Smythe, who was allowed by James Bond to commit suicide rather than be captured in the short story. So it was Octopussy and Major Dexter Smythe gave her a nickname. So I'm just looking at my cheat sheet here.
Right, and I think she mentioned that
it was Octopussy. Back and forth we go.
Yeah. But yeah, Octopussy, she explains that to him in the, when they first kind of meet each other.
Right, exactly. So that was a connection to the short story that allowed them to use the title Octopussy.
So is the short story about the relationship between Bond and the father?
No. Oh, yeah, it's a relationship between Bond and the father, but it has nothing to do with the plot of the movie. They made a completely different plot.
Right, but I'm listening to that bit of backstory in the movie and I think, oh, that'd be kind of cool to find out about. But now I guess I can. I can go dig up the short story.
There you go, sir.
Yeah.
There was also, this is another interesting fact, besides the fact that Sean Connery played Bond again in '83 and Never Say Never. There was a little cameo in a TV movie about the Saint, or what was it, the Saint, or Man from U.N.C.L.E., excuse me. It redid the Man from U.N.C.L.E., a 60s TV show, in 1983 as a TV movie. So who appears in it but George Lazenby, who had played Bond, and he played a character named JB and drove an Aston Martin. So all three Bonds appeared in separate movies in 1983. Take that to your trivia bank, my friend.
Wow.
Yes, that wild. Also, this is the last film. If you watch the Bond movies in order, at the end of each credit sequence, they'll say James Bond returns in Thunderball, and James Bond returns in, Live and Let Die. And this is the last one that said that James Bond will return in From a View to a Kill. So it was changed to A View to a Kill, and that was the one. I think the first Pierce Brosnan, right? So this was
no, it was Timothy Dalton, because Dalton preceded
Dalton,
Brosnan.
right? Dalton,
yeah.
Dalton was after him. This was the sixth one to star Roger Moore. He equaled the number of Bond movies that Sean Connery made in the official franchise. So Connery, I think, maybe did Never Say Never, so he can say, I did it 7 times. Did you ever see the original Casino Royale?
With the Woody Allen one?
Yeah, the Woody Allen one.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
It's virtually incomprehensible. Yeah, there's such a vagueness to it that you literally can't follow it. It's crazy. It's so weird. What a weird movie. And so it was right for the picking when they redid the Bond franchise and put in Daniel Craig. So it worked out really well for them.
I'll have to scratch that off my list at some point, because I've always heard about it, and I like Woody Allen and I like James Bond. I just can't picture them like crossing paths. However,
it was an ill-fated kind of parody. It didn't work. There's nothing worse than a parody that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Not only do you dishonor the source, you dishonor yourself.
I like that. That should be in a movie. That's a good quote.
There you go. So anything else on this that you're
The only thing really is there's a nice shot of an actual octopus in the movie in Octopussy's tank. And during
yes,
the big kind of apartment bedroom siege where the henchmen come in and it's got the guy with the saw blade, the octopus actually attaches itself to one of the henchmen and he falls on the floor. And I immediately thought, this reminds me of, Ridley Scott's Alien with the face hugger. I'm like,
right.
it's a coincidence. But then they cut back to the guy and he's laying on the ground and it's a close up of his face with it just like breathing on him. I'm like, that's definitely they have to be paying homage there.
Well, yeah, and is this like the mother film of all like we'll steal it from we'll steal bits and pieces from, because there's so many examples in this film of which were done again in other films that are completely unrelated to it. So that was a good catch.
Yeah, and as we've talked about, the 2023 summer blockbusters have, even if they don't know it, they've cribbed very liberally from Octopussy. So I would recommend to people out there, if you're kind of burnt out on going to the movies and seeing these kind of generic movies, these action, blockbusters, rent or just own Octopussy, because
Right.
we've mentioned some other films before, but in terms of what it's trying to do, at the bottom of the scale is Dial of Destiny, the Indiana Jones 5. In the middle, believe it or not, is Mission Impossible 7, because even though it's great, you can still see the 2023 machinations of, oh, we're going to enhance this with CGI, we're going to cover this, this angle. You can tell it's still kind of fake. But then you go back 40 years to Octopussy and you realize that they're doing most of this stuff in, practical effects, practical stunts, real death-defying stuff to bring you this entertainment. And it's just, I wish we could get back to that. I mean, I know we never will, but wouldn't it be great if someone said, we're going to make $100 million action blockbuster and we're not going to use computer enhancements any more than is absolutely necessary to like maybe
It'll
hide a
never
wire.
happen again,
No.
unfortunately. But I think I wanted to come up with a concluding statement, but uh, going back to that Bond group that I'm part of, I don't think I want to mention that I saw this and liked it, but I think it has to do again with the fact that I really like Roger Moore in the part. So my Bond and seeing him in this film, which I heard over many years, the last 5 years at least, as part of the Bond group, that this is the worst travesty of any of them. And then to come upon and say, not only is it not a travesty, but it's actually has something to say about geopolitics, and has a pretty complex plot, and has pretty strong women in it. So as a Bond film, I think it could stand up to any of the others, whether you like it or not. It pretty much is a Bond film. So
Yeah. It's the perfect blend, I think, of
yeah.
humor, of action, of intensity, and kind of character study. One of the things that really stood out to me, and this is kind of my concluding point,
Mhm.
when Bond is trying to get to that American base in Germany, he actually hitchhikes and he's there thumbing it on the road. And this group
Right.
of teenagers kind of there's cars passing him. This group of teenagers pulls up and he's about to run up to the car and then they laugh at him and give him some obscene gestures and then drive away. It's just a reminder that everything James Bond does is behind the scenes to save
Right.
the world. The average everyday person, they don't know that they've just, rejected us, they've refused to help a super spy who's trying to keep their entire country from blowing up. But it's just that a little
Right.
glimpse into that dichotomy that's completely lost in the Craig era and all of that. I mean, I know in one of them they like blew up Parliament or something like that, but we lose that man on the street kind of quality that I think is what you need, that balance to really make James Bond sing, to understand, well, the world might blow up. Well, what's that mean? Who is the world? It's not, five people in shady rooms plotting to take over the world. It's billions of people just walking around.
Yep. And lest we forget, all time high, the Bond theme And I'm trying to see where it went on the charts.
Well, it was one of those rare, well, not that rare, but it was one of the Bond themes that got, it crossed over. Talk about transitions. It crossed over into, regular radio play. I never knew this as a Bond theme. I just knew it as, an oldie on the radio.
But it only got up to number 75. It remains the lowest charting James Bond theme.
Really?
Yeah. So,
look, all I know is I worked at Kmart for 3 years back in high school, between high school and art school. I must have heard all-time high on the Kmart radio station 5,000 times during that 3 years.
Sometimes things don't necessarily chart because they're in the Bond film. They'll keep getting played, on these types of in-store. How was working at Kmart, by the way?
Oh, it was great. I'll tell you some Kmart stories sometime.
Yeah, please do. Well, we can conclude this because I have something to ask after this.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. But yeah. So Pat, this has been OCTOPUSSY. I'm glad we decided to talk about it. It's 40 years old. I don't think it gets nearly the respect that it deserves. I think it's something that modern audiences can, might have to adjust some expectations. But in terms of like the so-called political correctness of how it handles certain things and characters, but it's thrilling. It's a fun ride, and I think a really solid James Bond film.
And it's Roger Moore.
Roger Moore. All right. Well, Pat, where can people find you? What do you got going on?
Well, right now, as always, HollywoodChicago.com. You can listen to me on the radio, WBGR FM in Monroe, Wisconsin, and WSSR FM, Joliet, Illinois. We're simulcast on 2 other stations. So all around Chicagoland. All right.
Well,
at 4 o'clock.
Fridays at 4. Well, I'll have information on all of that down below, so folks, you can check him out. Support Pat. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And next month we'll be back talking about something else. I can't remember what's on the docket, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Yeah, I got to bring that up. I got to bring it up. Yes. It's enough for me to be able to remember to press record on these, taking it one step at a time.
Very good.
All right, sir. Well, thank you. Take care, and blessings as always.
Blessings to you, sir.